When you're playing with Jordan and when you're playing with LeBron, what are the most athletic things you felt like you saw them do up close, whether it was in a game or in a practice? How did they display their athleticism to you?
Well, I was very fortunate. I had Michael Jordan in the prime of his career when he was trying to learn how to play with his back to the basket. And he'd always grab me after practice to play one-on-one down in the post. He couldn't shoot it outside of 16 feet. Anytime he came into the lane, I was allowed to hammer him as hard as I wanted to. So I used to try to slow him down. Problem was the dude was cat quick. I used my length and my strength against him, but he was just so goddamn fast, I couldn't keep up with him. Up and unders, shoulder moves, shimmy shakes, that move where he puts his back up against the opponent to fill the opponent. There was nothing I could do to stay with him. Hate to say, but I never won one of those one-on-one matchups. Fast forward 15 years later, I'm in Cleveland with LeBron James, first day of practice. He comes driving the ball down the lane. I'm a defensive-minded player. I instinctively react to jump in front of him and draw the charge. We crash into each other, and he goes down, and my first thought was, oh, no, I think I just took out the franchise player. He pops right up and jogs back down the floor. Meanwhile, it took two guys to help get me off the floor, and I'm thinking, I hope this young kid didn't hurt me at 36 years old. So two different style players, both very explosive, both very powerful. I'd have to give the quickness edge to Michael Jordan.
Scott, when you were in college, do you remember, and I remember this as a kid, when Jordan came onto the scene in the NBA, not at North Carolina, but the NBA, the way he played in the air, we had never seen anything like that.
No, I agree. I was still in high school at the time watching them on TV. But when you get an up close and front personal view of the things that he would do in practice, what were so amazing that I wish we had more, the NBA had more access to the team facilities back in the day, because we would have loved to be able to go back and watch all of the spectacular dunks he had just going 5-on-5 against the B team. Those were the amazing things that I saw in him, the way he had the ability to adjust. And it was my job, given to me by Tex Winter, to go in and basically, and Johnny Bach, to try to play the way the Detroit Pistons would play against Jordan. So be physical with him, knock him to the ground. And he had no fear. The guy was just amazing the way he could contort his body in live action at the split second and still be able to find a way to slam him home.
Scott Williams is our guest. He's a three-time NBA champion. He's an alum, of course, played at North Carolina as well. He's got a new book out. We'll get to that in just a moment, but he is one of only 4 people in the history of the world who has played with Michael Jordan and also played with LeBron James. So we want to bring him on today to talk specifically about our great debate series, LeBron versus Jordan, and specifically about the athleticism. Now, Scott, Perloff has a little bit more, I want to say, a narrower view of athleticism. It's like running, jumping. How fast are you?
Yeah.
For me, it's a little more about the shooting. It's about the passing. It's about the versatility of maybe playing multiple positions. Obviously you have the utmost respect for both of these guys. I feel like that's where LeBron might actually get Jordan a little bit, is on the versatility and also the array of skills that we saw with LeBron being more of a passer specifically.
Well, I think you hit the nail right on the head there, Maggie. If you want to start throwing skills, passing, shooting, playmaking, all those types of things into the equation, I think LeBron can narrow the gap some. But I'm like Perloff. If you're just talking about explosion, speed, quickness, agility, the athleticism, I got to give the edge to Michael Jordan.
Okay.
Of course, the guy put 3 championship rings on my fingers.
Wait, Scott
he went to my alma mater, North Carolina. So, I don't get to come back into the state of North Carolina if I don't say Michael Jordan.
Scott, I knew you'd be on my side. I was like, we got to get Scott Williams. He's a Tar Heel and he's a Bull. Are you kidding me?
I know. He popped up on the Zoom wearing a Bull shirt and drinking coffee out of a North Carolina mug.
The championship ring today too, Maggie.
Thank you. I know this is where, it kind of breaks down that I'm, have found myself a little more on the LeBron side, where Perloff is more on the Jordan side, but that's what makes this fun. Well, just to move away from athleticism for a moment, though, as a teammate, Can you describe some of the similarities or differences? I know obviously LeBron was very young when you were with him, his only second year in the league. But in terms of them being teammates, how would you describe both of them?
Well, as you just pointed out, LeBron was still developing how to be, not only just establish himself in the league, but how to be a leader of the team against guys that were much older, right? So a leader of men. So that part was not in full swing yet when I was there, but having been around the Cavs 2 years after that, doing the analyst work for them, I got a chance to see that developmental side of him. Both very strong leaders, leading by example, which I think when you're playing with, guys that are pros that have been the best player at their high school level, their college level, and now in the NBA, and they have to listen to a teammate, there's a certain way that you have to handle situations, maybe a little bit different depending on the personality of the player. I think both Michael and LeBron were very good at doing both of that.
Just to follow up quickly on that, Scott, I feel like, because Jordan was so famous for his killer instinct, and the grudge holding and holding everyone to such a high standard, the accountability, he lived it, right? And so, you felt like he could dole it out as well. Does LeBron have the killer instinct? Because I think it gets glossed over a little, like he doesn't possess this. And to me, that seems like it can't possibly be the case.
I'm glad you brought up Michael Jordan's, I guess, beast mode mentality. I had played with the Bulls prior to MJ having a championship ring. That guy was a lot different than the guy you saw in the 10-part series documentary, The Last Dance, who was allowing Dennis Rodman to run off to Vegas during the middle of the season with Carmen Electra. That would not have flown with the dude that I played with. He was way more serious as a heart attack, a cold-blooded assassin. I like both of their competitiveness and their killer instinct, but I'm going to tell you right now, nothing compares to the way Michael Jordan not only wanted to beat an opponent, but also leave them knowing that they could never beat him in a series, a 7-game series. They won't even dream about beating him in their dreams and their fantasies when they put their heads on their pillow. Their friends, their family, their fans, they won't believe that they could ever best Michael Jordan. That's what he did to not only just NBA players. I'm talking the greats of the games, the guys that were the Hall of Famers on their teams that were in those championship series. He robbed guys with extreme confidence. He took that from them like nobody I've ever seen before. LeBron will want to beat you, no doubt about that, but he does not leave you with that same feeling that Michael wants to snatch from people.
Scott, just in case any of our listeners don't know really the whole story of when Michael retired from the first time, did you know that was going to happen in any sense before it was announced?
I did not. I was actually at a White Sox game when word started filtering around that he was going to possibly announce his retirement the night before. And I knew he was at the game in a suite, but I could not get to him the way security was blocking him off because I was sad. And I know Jerry Reinsdorf, the Chicago Bulls owner, wanted to think of it as a celebration of having watched the game's greatest player win 3 championships. But in my opinion, I write a little bit about it in my book, Through the Fire, I think it had more to do with he was burnt out of basketball, and it was the summer of the passing of his father's tragic death. So I think he needed some time to mourn and grieve. And it was hard for the biggest athlete on the not only in NBA but on the planet to find space to be able to do that. I just wish I would have known that he was going to come back 6 months after I left the Bulls. I would have had maybe 4 or 5 more rings, not just the 3 that I got in the first 3 feet.
Scott Williams is our guest. He's a 3-time NBA champ and talking to us about Michael Jordan versus LeBron James because he played with both. You mentioned, though, about your book. It's called Through the Fire, a memoir of trauma and loss. You mentioned Michael Jordan tragically losing his father. You have also been through much tragedy, Scott, losing both of your parents. I believe that was during your sophomore year at UNC. What made you want to explore this really heavy topic now?
Yeah, I did lose my mom to the hands of my father going into the first day of practice, my sophomore season, and Coach Smith was the one that had to deliver the news to me. And it was something that was obviously very tragic and hard to concentrate on basketball. And I had a lot of dark thoughts during that period of time over the course of that season. Basketball became therapeutic for me. And during the Last Dance, when there was no sports, we started talking a lot about those days in the Bulls and got to reminisce with some of my former teammates and talk about the glory days from 30 years back. And I also was hearing about at the University of North Carolina, how during that time period, 5 young students had taken their lives. And I've been in that dormitory on that campus. And I wanted to share my story because, one, Coach Smith always told us when we were his not only players but students and his sons, that it's never too late to do the right thing. So here it is, some 35 years after that thing happened to me, that I hope that this book lands itself into some young man or some young girl's hands, and they can read it and see that if Scott Williams can also go through some of the things that I have and accomplish his goal of getting a college degree and dreams of playing in the NBA, that they could do it too.
Wow. Scott, it's so interesting too. I've about to be teenage kids too. There's a whole world of stuff going on. I talked to Maggie about it, social media and everything. I think it's hard to talk about the mental pressure on teenagers already. And I think it's something that should be out in the open more, especially when even we're talking about young athletes all the time, but it's not easy.
No, it's not easy. And I think back in the day, it was a sign of weakness to say that you were struggling mentally, that you got to be stronger, and that's not always easy if you don't have somebody that you can fight in and talk to. I talk a lot about the early times of my childhood, growing up with domestic abuse in the household, and how it's shameful. And you don't want people to know, but if you can have a coach or somebody in the family or a teacher that you can open up to, I highly recommend it. I'm so happy into today's not only NBA, but sports landscape, that mental health has become so much more important, and that teams and leagues are letting athletes take the time that they need to get the help that they deserve.
Scott, last one for you. And again, the book is called Through the Fire, a memoir of trauma and loss. How do you balance using basketball as a way to cope as opposed to using basketball as duct tape, right? To suppress those things and to not really, face them as you obviously need to through the grieving process?
Yeah, the basketball part of it's great. You're having to lock in on a Dean Smith practice or a Phil Jackson practice. It takes your mind off it for those 2.5 to 3 hours that you're on the court banging with your teammates, trying to lock into a practice plan or a scouting report. But you're right. It's that time away from the court. Now how do you manage those types of moments? Who can you go to and turn to talk to? Is it a teammate, a friend, a sibling, a coach, a teacher, or a health professional? And I implore people just to try to figure out a way to open up. And it's not easy. It's not difficult. Like I said, to write this book and share some of the things that I do in the book, it's taken me a long time. I'm a 55-year-old grown man, and I was even concerned that I'd have to worry about Twitter trolls. But my mama at the end of the day said she didn't raise no soft kids, and that if I can help a young man or a young girl out there, that it'd be all worth it.
Hey, Scott, one more quick basketball question. You played in Philadelphia with Sean Bradley. I'm from Philadelphia, and I saw how hard it was to translate that tall, skinny body into any kind of NBA stardom. You could never put on weight. And that's why I keep telling Maggie I'm so cynical about Victor Wembanyama, because I was promised Sean Bradley was going to change the NBA, and it never worked. But having played with Bradley, do you think it's Wembanyama could be the same thing?
Yeah, I got a chance to play with Sean, a good friend, and I hope he's doing well after his serious accident. Unfortunately, though, I don't think the two players' mentalities are quite the same. I love Sean to death, but I never felt like he loved basketball. He played it because he was tall, athletic, and talented, but he wasn't a student of the game away from the court or the practice court. He didn't watch a lot of basketball. We talk about games. He wasn't part of his lifestyle. I think this young man at 19 years old seems to have a different look at the approach to the game. And I know that in that great Popovich system down there is definitely going to be a plus to help him in his development, without a doubt. I think that they're two different players. I look for great things from this young man in years 3, 4, and 5.